Before battle, medieval soldiers needed more than weapons. They needed food that gave them strength. They didn't eat for fun. They ate to stay alive, fight harder, and survive the longest. These 10 powerful foods helped fuel men who were ready to risk everything. First up, boiled barley with salted fat. If you've ever complained about your morning oatmeal being bland, thank your lucky stars. You weren't a medieval soldier. Before charging into battle, these warriors filled their bellies with the world's most boring yet effective breakfast. Boiled barley mixed with chunks of salted animal fat. Talk about a meal that could both sustain you and make you question your career choices. Barley was the perfect warrior food because it grew almost anywhere in cold regions, warm areas, even in poor soil. Armies could find it in nearly every territory they conquered. A single field could feed hundreds of fighters, making it the ultimate military crop. While modern soldiers get energy bars, medieval warriors got what looked like something your cat might cough up. The preparation was simple. Throw barley into massive pots, add water, and boil until mushy. No spices, no sweeteners, just plain mush. It looked so appetizing that prisoners would confess just to avoid another serving. The original truth serum wasn't torture. It was Wednesday's barley special. The real secret weapon was the fat mixed into it. Typically salted pork fat, beef tallow, or goat fat. Each spoonful contained over 100 calories, adding serious energy reserves. A modern nutritionist would have a heart attack just looking at it. The first and only diet where extra fat was written on the prescription. A single bowl could keep a fighter energized from sunrise until well past noon. The combination of carbs from barley and energy from fat created perfect battle fuel. The texture was deliberately mushy so exhausted soldiers could eat quickly without chewing. Medieval fast food meant exactly that. Food you could eat fast, not food that would make you fast. While this meal lacked flavor, it delivered results. After all, nobody ever carved a statue of a soldier holding up a victory salad. Speaking of strong-smelling foods that kept medieval warriors going, the next battlefield superfood packed such a powerful punch you could smell it coming from a mile away. The smell hit you before the enemy did. Medieval soldiers smeared a pungent mixture of crushed garlic and onions on almost everything they ate before battle. This potent paste served as both food and medicine, creating an army that could defeat enemies with their breath alone. Raw garlic contains a compound called allicin that forms only when the clove is crushed. Records from the 1300s show that military units received daily garlic rations. Knights got 6 cloves while common soldiers received 3. The class system was alive and well, even in bad breath. Preparing the paste required nothing more than stones for crushing and maybe a splash of vinegar to preserve it. Soldiers carried small clay pots tied to their belts, ready for a quick energy boost during marches or before combat. Unlike modern energy drinks with fancy packaging, this medieval power-up came with the side effect of friends standing at least 10 feet away at all times. The paste wasn't just for energy, it helped keep soldiers alive. Garlic contains natural antibiotic properties that fought infections from battlefield wounds. Onions added vitamin C that prevented scurvy during long campaigns. When you couldn't shower for months and lived in close quarters with hundreds of other smelly men, anything that might keep sickness away was worth the social cost. Some spread it on bread, others mixed it into stews. The brave ate spoonfuls straight from their containers before battle. Medical texts claimed the mixture gave the body inner heat that protected against arrows and sword cuts. While it didn't stop steel, the confidence boost was real. Interestingly, enemy armies could often tell which fighting force they faced by smell alone. Spanish troops added extra garlic, while Northern Europeans preferred more onion. You could say medieval warfare was the original battle of the brands, except these brands made your eyes water from 50 paces. At least garlic and onions were recognizable as food. The next item on our menu was so basic and practical that modern people might mistake it for building materials rather than lunch. You might throw away bread when it gets hard, or toss cheese it's turned a bit funky. But medieval soldiers treasured these exact foods. Old cheese and stale bread formed the backbone of battlefield nutrition for centuries, a combination so practical that entire wars were won on its crust. Hard cheeses were essential for military campaigns because they didn't spoil quickly. The aging process removes moisture and increases salt content, naturally preserving the food. Soldiers carried chunks wrapped in cloths or leather pouches, sometimes for weeks. By the time some battles ended, the cheese was so hard it could have been used as a backup weapon. The bread was equally sturdy. Bakers for military units deliberately overcooked it until dense and dry. Some armies created what we'd now recognize as hard tack, flour and water baked into rock solid. The dryness prevented mold, allowing bread to last for months. A few months ago, I had no idea what a health ring even was until my fiancé got me one. And I have to say, I'm shocked this isn't a widely known and used product. It tracks my stress levels. And what I found out is that some supplements made my stress score spike, while others actually helped bring it down. I adjusted a few things based on that, and honestly, I feel 10 years younger. My wife mainly uses it to track her menstrual cycles, and she is obsessed with her sleep quality score. I noticed they are currently running a limited 69% discount, but I don't know how long it will last. It asks currently only $60, and it asks clear this one is the best bang for your buck, with other health rings priced around $350 with less functions. They managed to price it this low because they cut out the middleman like Amazon, Walmart, etc., who drive up the price and take a big margin, ending up with the customer paying 3 to 5 times more. If you are on TV, you can check it out yourself by pausing the video and scanning the QR code with your phone camera, or clicking the first link in the description of this video. Modern dentists would shudder at the thought, but medieval soldiers simply had stronger jaws or fewer teeth to worry about. Soldiers often had to soak the hot bread in whatever liquid was available, water, ale, or stew, just to make it soft enough to chew without cracking teeth. Some used their daggers to shave thin pieces off loaves too hard to bite directly. The cheese, meanwhile, became more pungent with age, developing strong flavors that would make modern taste buds rebel. What made this combo brilliant was its practicality. Together, they provided carbohydrates, protein, fat, and calcium in one portable package. No cooking required. One English military document from 1386 claimed that 40 pounds of hard cheese could feed 100 men for 2 days during forced march. The bread often served multiple purposes beyond food. Soldiers would use flat pieces as makeshift plates, eating surfaces, or even as emergency patches for holes in their boots. Truly the first multi-purpose survival tool before Swiss Army knives were invented. When soldiers needed something to wash down their hard cheese and bread, they reached for a drink that would raise eyebrows at modern restaurants. Medieval soldiers rarely drank water. Instead, thick ale flowed through army camps, serving as the main source of hydration before battle. This medieval ale was closer to liquid porridge than the clear fizzy drinks we pour today. It was the original meal in a mug centuries before protein shakes made that sound appealing. The brewing process turned barley into a nutrient-rich drink through fermentation. Unlike today's filtered beers, medieval ale contained floating bits of grain, yeast, and whatever else fell into the brewing vat. The chunks floating in your cup weren't bugs. They were extra protein. Medieval quality control was simple. If it wasn't moving on its own, it was fine to drink. This thick drink solved the deadly water problem. In an age before anyone understood germs, the brewing process and alcohol content killed enough harmful bacteria to make ale safer than plain water. Medieval soldiers didn't know about microbiology, but they knew that water made you sick while ale made you happy. Early scientific research at its finest. A quart of ale contained roughly 500 calories, about a quarter of a soldier's daily needs in one mug. It delivered B vitamins that helped fighters maintain energy during battles. Soldiers didn't just drink their ale, they chewed it. It was the first energy drink that actually made you less athletic with every serving. The mild alcohol content helped calm pre-battle nerves without seriously impairing fighting ability. A saying from the time suggested that a cup of ale brings courage, a barrel brings defeat. It was a perfect amount of liquid courage, just enough to make you think charging toward sharp, pointy objects was a reasonable career choice. After filling up on thick ale, medieval soldiers still needed solid food with serious sustaining power. For that, they turned to something humble yet mighty that could be cooked in massive quantities over a single fire. Gather around the medieval army cooking pot to discover the humble food that fueled countless victories. Stewed legumes, lentils, beans, and peas boiled into thick, hearty mush became the backbone of military nutrition across Europe for over 1,000 years. Dried legumes were nearly indestructible. They could travel in cloth sacks for months without spoiling and survive rough wagon journeys. Supply wagons carried huge quantities as a single pound of dried beans expanded to feed 4 hungry soldiers once cooked. Military quartermasters loved this math. Less weight to transport meant faster moving armies. The cooking method couldn't have been simpler. Handfuls of dried legumes were tossed in, and the whole mixture was left to boil for hours over campfires. The flavor was so exciting that soldiers sometimes fought over who got to guard the camp instead of going into battle. What legumes lacked in taste, they made up for in nutrition. These tiny seeds delivered serious protein up to 25% by weight, making them comparable to meat in their ability to build and repair muscle. Their complex carbohydrates release energy slowly throughout the day, helping soldiers maintain strength during long battles. Different regions favored different legumes. Northern armies relied on hardy peas that grew even in poor soil. Mediterranean forces preferred various beans, while Eastern European troops often used lentils, which cooked faster when time was limited. Some clever commanders actually planted legume crops along planned invasion routes, creating living supply depots. Hot food was rare on campaigns, and a steaming bowl of bean stew could lift spirits even in miserable conditions. Nothing says ready for battle like an army that just finished a bean feast. The enemy could hear them coming from a mile away. The digestive side effects were so powerful that some military historians believe certain night ambushes were compromised by the unmistakable sounds and smells produced by legume-fueled troops. Nature's war drums were impossible to silence. When armies needed to supplement their stewed legumes with something more substantial for the strongest fighters, they turned to a food that was rare but prized on the battlefield. For a medieval soldier, finding meat on the bone was like discovering gold. While regular armies today might get beef stew or chicken, medieval fighters rarely saw fresh meat except before major battles or after victories. It was the ultimate power of food saved for moments when strength mattered most. The menu was practical rather than fancy. Goat meat was prized for its ability to stay fresh longer in hot weather. Pork from wild boars or farm pigs provided more fat, which meant more energy. When times were truly desperate, horse meat appeared in cooking pots. The medieval soldier's butcher shop didn't have a seafood section or a vegan alternative corner. Cooking methods were limited by battlefield conditions. The most common approach was to roast meat on spits over open fires, allowing the fat to drip down and baste the meat naturally. When time allowed, troops would boil chunks in large cauldrons, creating a rich broth that could be sped up with bread. Nothing went to waste. Bones were cracked open to access the nutrient-rich marrow inside. For longer campaigns, meat was preserved through salting or smoking. Strips would be packed in salt, then hung near fires to dry into a form of jerky. This technique produced tough but portable protein that could last for weeks. It was probably the only food in history that gave you a workout just by eating it. Different ranks received different cuts. Naturally, military leaders enjoyed prime sections like haunches or loins, while common soldiers usually received tougher cuts. A record from an English campaign in 1388 noted that knights received 1 pound of meat on battle mornings, while archers got half that amount. Many cultures believe that eating meat, especially from strong animals, transferred those animals' qualities to the warrior. Military leaders encouraged this belief, frequently describing meat as real food for real men before battles. Medieval motivational posters would have shown a bearded warrior holding a turkey leg instead of saying, "Hang in there." When meat wasn't available, but soldiers still needed a filling meal for sustained energy, they turned to a humble but mighty food that served as the foundation of medieval military cuisine. What happens when you take grains like oats, rye, or barley, boil them into a soupy mess, and serve it to hungry soldiers? You get grain grill, the most boring yet reliable food in medieval military history. This simple dish powered more conquests, defenses, and marshes than any other food from the medieval period. Gruel differed from porridge, mainly in its wetness. While porridge was thick enough to hold a spoon upright, GRL flowed like a thick soup. Army cooks would start with 1 part grain to 6 parts water, then adjust the ratio depending on how many months needed feeding. When times were especially tough, the group became so thin you could read battle plans through it. Making a required minimal skill. Grains would be tossed into cauldrons of water and boiled until they broke down, creating a starchy liquid. Unlike barley with fat, grill was often flavored if possible. Common additions included salt herbs gathered from nearby fields, or honey if the army was wealthy. Some military records from the 1300s mentioned purchasing barrels of honey specifically for grill during winter campaigns. The beauty of grill came from its adaptability. In northern regions it was made with oats that could withstand colder climates. In Central Europe, rye grill dominated troop meals. Mediterranean armies often used wheat when available, though this luxury was typically reserved for officers. Nutritionally, grill had advantages over plain bread. The liquid cooking method unlocked nutrients in the grain that might otherwise pass through the body under. This meant hungry soldiers absorbed more calories from each handful of precious grain. Each soldier typically carried their own wooden bowl and spoon, lining up at the cooking pots when meals were ready. One surviving military manual from 1402 recommends that officers supervise grill distribution to ensure fair portions for all ranks. The fact that they needed rules about sharing grill tells you everything about how exciting medieval cuisine could be. "Please, sir, may I have some more watery grain soup?" it said no one enthusiastically ever. The meal might have looked like dishwater, but it transformed ordinary farmers into soldiers who could march 20 meters then fight for hours. When commanders wanted to boost morale with something sweeter than plain they turned to a rare treat that combined energy with pleasure for their chosen warriors. Not all medieval battlefield foods were bland mush or rock-hard bread. Honey cakes stood out as rare battlefield treats, sweet energy-packed snacks reserved for knights or elite warriors before important battles. While common soldiers got girls, knights got the medieval equivalent of a power bar, except it actually tasted good. Medieval honey cakes combined honey with ground nuts and grain, usually barley, oats, or wheat. The mixture was formed into flat, dense discs about the size of a hockey puck. The first rule of nightclub was making sure you got your honey cake. A single cake could contain more than 600 calories, about a third of a day's energy needs for an active warrior. The combination of fast-acting sugar from honey and slower-burning fats from nuts created the perfect energy profile for combat. A medieval knight probably couldn't tell you about blood sugar spikes, but he knew the difference between quick energy and staying power. Their nutritionists were basically just guys who hadn't died yet. Some military units actually had the cakes blessed by priests before battle, believing this would transfer divine strength to whoever ate them. Apparently, God had a sweet tooth and preferred his prayer with a side of dessert. Commanders understood the psychological power of these treats. One English military record notes honey cakes being promised as rewards for the first soldiers to breach an enemy wall. Medieval performance bonuses didn't come with direct deposit, but they tasted a lot better than modern ones. Not all battlefield foods were so pleasant, however. For true dietary courage, some soldiers turned to a dish that tested even the strongest stomachs and supposedly gave fighters the strength of wild beasts. Now we come to the battlefield food that separated the men from the boys. Spiced porridge mixed with animal blood. This hearty concoction was exactly what it sounds like. Hot grain porridge stirred together with fresh blood from pigs, cattle, or whatever animals were available for slaughter. It was basically breakfast cereal with a horror movie twist. This unusual dish wasn't served everywhere. It appeared mainly in northern European armies during harsh winters or before particularly difficult battles. The reasoning was simple. Blood added iron, protein, and what medieval people called living heat to the body. In the coldest regions, this extra warmth could mean the difference between fighting effectively and freezing on the battlefield. The preparation required careful timing. First, a thick porridge would be made from whatever grains were available, usually oats in Scotland and northern England or rye in Germanic regions. The hot porridge would then be mixed with fresh blood, creating a dark, rich mixture. Most modern cooking shows skip this recipe, which is probably for the best. Spices played a crucial role in making this intense food palatable. Records from the 1300s mention armies traveling with precious cinnamon, ginger, and pepper specifically for blood porridge. These warming spices were believed to enhance the heating properties of the blood and mask its metallic taste. Medieval medical thinking held that consuming blood transferred the strength and vitality of the animal to the warrior. A military medical text from 1412 recommends bull-as blood specifically for soldiers who would be in the front lines of battle, claiming it would give them the charge of the bull and steadiness in the face of enemies. The dish provided remarkable nutrition. Modern analysis suggests a bowl of blood porridge could deliver up to 25 grams of protein and significant amounts of iron, zinc, and B vitamins. For soldiers facing iron deficiency from poor diets, the blood component could actually improve energy levels. Nothing motivates troops like the threat of punishment if they don't eat their blood breakfast. Eating your horrifying porridge or facing consequences was apparently effective leadership in some armies. In some regions, this battlefield food evolved into more refined forms that persist today, including blood sausages, black pudding, and similar dishes still enjoyed across Europe. The modern version comes with far fewer battle cries and much better table manners. Military diets weren't only about adding strong foods. Keeping healthy during long campaigns required something that could prevent the dreaded diseases that often killed more soldiers than actual combat. The secret weapon in many medieval military campaigns wasn't a new sword or shield. It was fermented cabbage and pickled turnips. These humble vegetables helped keep armies alive during long winter campaigns when fresh food was nowhere to be found. Fermented cabbage, an early version of sauerkraut, became standard military food across Europe by the 1200s. Cabbage would be packed into barrels with salt and pressed down. Natural bacteria would transform it into a tangy food that could last for months. Unlike fresh vegetables that went limp and sad after a few days, fermented cabbage maintained its crunch and attitude indefinitely. The cockroach of the vegetable world. In regions where cabbage was less common, turnips took center stage. These rude vegetables were chopped, packed in salt brine, and left to pickle. The resulting food was tangy, crunchy, and filled with vitamin C. Military records from 1410 note specific wagons dedicated to transporting barrels of pickled vegetables behind troops. These foods solved one of the biggest killers in medieval armies. This disease caused by vitamin C deficiency weakens the body, causes gums to bleed, and eventually leads to death. Armies that marched for months, especially in winter, often lost more men to scurvy than to enemy weapons. Death by bleeding gums was considerably less glorious than death by sword. Not the kind of end that got you into warrior heaven with a good story. The fermentation process actually increases nutrients. Properly fermented cabbage can contain up to 4 times more vitamin C than fresh cabbage, a crucial difference during long winter campaigns. A daily handful provided enough to keep soldiers functioning. These foods were distributed in a variety of ways. Sometimes soldiers received daily rations of pickled vegetables. In other cases, communal barrels traveled with the troops, with each fighter expected to help themselves to a portion daily. Military commanders might not have understood the exact science, but they observed that troops who ate these foods regularly stayed healthier. Soldiers had mixed feelings about these pungent preserved vegetables. Medieval military wisdom boiled down to eat your stinky vegetables or die a toothless death. The tradition of soldiers relying on preserved vegetables continued for centuries. Even into the 1700s, British naval vessels carried sauerkraut on long voyages to prevent scurvy among sailors. As we finish our journey through medieval battlefield nutrition, it's clear that these warriors understood something important. Food wasn't just fuel, but a strategic resource as valuable as any weapon.